think of like King Arthur's sword, right? At once upon a time, it was just a sword, but as he wielded it, it became sort of the sword. And I guess like some legends of King Arthur are like, oh, it was a special sword to begin with, but you kind of get the point that like there are these items that like as you use them, they gain like fame, they gain power as part of it.
Hello, adventurers, and welcome to Design Journals, a new series where I sit down with Varun to discuss Call to Power. Today, we're discussing the main aspects of characters. So, I was curious, based on some of our conversations previously, what are some forms of power that a player might be able to access?
Yeah, so there's basically three, like we call them pillars of power. These are like the main ways that you as characters progress into going from mortals to something beyond mortals. And those pillars are basically, there's two that are very familiar to people. That's classes. So everyone's kind of coming from, if you've played 5e, if you've played D&D, a lot of games actually have classes these days. It's kind of a common RPG trope. And basically what classes do is they're just your guaranteed progression, right? Just playing the game, you're always going to get a class. You're always going to get some level of progression that comes from your class, and that's fine. It's like the kind of basis, the ingredients, so to speak. But then the next pillar is a little bit more obscure, and we do it a little bit differently, even if people recognize it. So we have a whole artifact and magical relics kind of system. And so everyone's like, oh yeah, like my game has magical items, or it has items, or whatever you want to call it, gear, all kind of synonymous, right? The way Call to Power does those like kinds of things though is a little bit different, because we aren't really about, hey, here's generic item number 52, right? We are more about, yes, there are generic items. Those are the ones you can go to your local blacksmith and they'll just whip one up for you in a couple minutes. That's not a big deal. But the point of Call to Power is that as you progress, more and more of your relics, as we call them, get replaced with things that are more powerful, like things that are more customized and fit to you. So like as you wield a sword, it gains a reputation, a notoriety, and that reputation and notoriety makes it more powerful. Kind of think of like King Arthur's sword, right? At once upon a time, it was just a sword, but as he wielded it, it became sort of the sword. And I guess like some legends of King Arthur are like, oh, it was a special sword to begin with, but you kind of get the point that like there are these items that like as you use them, they gain like fame, they gain power as part of it. Whether they were put in a stone or whether they were wielded by some great person or whatever it was, end result is they become something more. Okay. And those are like two of the three, but then there's the third. The third is ascensions. Ascensions are basically the sort of like progression mechanism that is built into the narrative. So if classes are sort of like the, oh, you beat up the monster, or oh, you like did some quest, or you did something that warrants achievement, that's how your classes progress. But ascensions don't progress that way. To progress in ascension, you actually have to do something that's like deeply unique to you. It has to be something that you went out of your way and kind of push the narrative in a way that matters to you and that is very personal to your character. So like lichdom, right? You have to go do something interesting. Or if you look at like Harry Potter, right? You have Voldemort and like the Horcruxes, that whole process of like building the Horcruxes and making a thing. I don't know a lot about Harry Potter, but I assume it seemed kind of arduous. And so that's kind of like the ascension process.
Okay. I'd love to get into that one in a future episode, but with all of these forms of power that a player has accessible to them, and we touched previously on classes a little bit, how exactly does a player progress?
That's a great question. I actually love our class design. I think there's a lot to talk about. So everyone hears that we have classes and they're expecting like, oh, you guys have 20 classes. No, we have 5 classes. And some people might be like, oh my God, like that's not enough classes. Like how am I going to play the interesting thing I want to play? But the way we kind of build our classes is sort of modular. So we talked about this, I think, before, but we have an approach where a lot of the class progression is not just, hey, you reached X level, congratulations, here's the thing you get at X level, move on with your life. It's very much, here's a choice. right? Every time you progress, you are given choices, with a few exceptions, but generally speaking, you're progressing and then you have to choose something. Like choose a sport to master, choose a paradigm of magic to pursue, choose a functional core of your engineering works. Like it's kind of like a way of consolidating your power, but it's very personal, right? It's driven by your choice. And you can change the choice. It's not like you choose it once and you're locked in forever, right? So it's like, for example, like as you're progressing as a mage, right? Maybe you dabble in battle magic and battle arts, right? So you have a lot of magic that's about hurting people and dealing damage. But then later, maybe you, as you progress in your character, you're like, okay, you know what I'm really lacking is healing magic, right? And so you can go dabble in physician. So it means that you can build a fully battle mage character, or you can also build like a half battle mage, half physician, or a fully physician, or the other like 12 paradigms or something. And it's sort of like you're picking the pieces that you care about and letting go of everything else, basically. So it makes even though there's only 5 classes, there's an incredible amount of customization in them.
That's really, really cool. And I really like that you can learn and pick and choose which magic to learn. And speaking of that, how do players even learn magic?
Okay, so this is also like a huge topic, but we'll go through it. So it's if you're a mage, you get arcane spellcasting is what we call it. And if you're coming in from like some of the really popular systems, like you might think, oh, like arcane versus divine. It's like, no, that's not what this means. Arcane magic is basically magic that is innate to your class, your progression. So it's basically the more experience you get, the more powerful and more frequently you can cast arcane magic. And so that's kind of like your class given magic. And it's also very flexible. We don't use like Vancian spell slots or anything like that. It's entirely about just kind of flexibly using your magic the way you want. But in contrast, there's 2 other sort of categories of magic. There's the Eldritch magic, which is basically magic that it has a cost, just like arcane magic is drawing from your what we call an arcane reservoir. The Eldritch magic draws from something, but it's not your arcane reservoir. So you don't actually need to be a quote unquote spell casting class in order to use Eldritch magic. In fact, one of the like really famous schools that almost everyone understands is exsanguination, right? It's blood magic. It's when you cast it, you're using your blood as a sort of like conduit for the magic. In which case, you can probably guess the cost is not your arcane reservoir. The cost is your life force, your hit points. So mages and the squishy spellcaster types are actually really bad at this school because casting the spell just kills them basically, as opposed to you've got your big tanky guys, like your big muscular like macho men. They're pretty good at this because they're like, yeah, I have blood to spare, I'll do whatever I need to do with it. So those are kind of like the main common, so to speak, like magic schools. Even like Eldritch magic is kind of like a rarely used, in lore at least, like rarely used magic source, but it's a very like accessible one if you go looking for it. And then there's that third category I mentioned. And we won't talk too much about it, but it's sort of like, we call it the eternal schools. And eternal schools are kind of like the ancient magic of like the universe itself. Like it's magic that isn't meant to be wielded by mortals, basically. It's the sort of archaic, very mystical, very ephemeral, hard to reach kind of magics. And we'll talk about that more at some later point, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think that would be very fun to deep dive on. So, since the players are pretty powerless initially, how long does it take to actually make a character then?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as I mentioned, like our classes are all about choices, right? So, each like individual progression is arguably a little longer in terms of time consumption than some other like games, because you actually have to choose something, right? But that being said, we try to make it so at any given point you're not choosing out of like 50 different options. You're choosing out of like 5 or 6. That's kind of like our magic number we like to use. Is when we designed our class, we were like, okay, at any given time, we want a player to have a couple of choices, enough to feel like there is variety, enough to feel like there is options, but not like an overwhelming amount. We don't want people to feel like, oh my God, there's just a billion options and 5 of them are the same option, just slightly different, right? Like we want people to feel like every option's like, oh, this is a different direction than the other ones. but like I kind of see a value of it. In fact, actually, like one of the things we were doing a lot of in like the later playtesting phases, we were kind of cutting out things, saying like, hey, this is too similar to this, just consolidate them, make them like one ability that kind of wraps up both of them, rather than trying to have both like individual, like similar but different, like same but different kind of vibes, you know?
Yeah, I think that's really important too, because especially if you get with a limited number of people at a table and things like that, if two people are interested in the same thing, it allows them to build a little bit more diversely from each other. And also, like, a party can cover a lot more with a fewer options. And I think that's really, really cool. So
yeah, no, and I think like that's a great point you're touching on. It's like we want characters to feel unique, right? So like Call of Power was designed for parties of like 4 to 6, right? And so 4 is not that hard to be unique, but like 6 is like, hey, if you have 5 classes but you have 6 players, someone has to play the same class as someone else. And so we wanted to make sure that our classes had the breadth that you could have multiple characters in the same party playing the same class and still feel like, oh, they're not just duplicates of each other. And in practice, in playtest, we've had plenty of characters who share the same class as other characters, and they feel completely different. If you've played Seek and Color with us at one of our weekends or at one of our in-person events, there's only like actually 3 classes in play at those events. Like we only have like a mystic, we have a mage, we have a athlete, sometimes we have an adept, but like there's usually 2 adepts in the party or there's 2 mages, and they play completely different from each other, like almost every time. Like it's like there's no mistake that they are different people. So it's really one of our, like, we try to make it so you feel unique, you want to feel special. After all, the game's about being special in a way.
yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I look forward to talking more about Call of Power in a future design entry, but for now we'll have to say goodbye.